Welcome to Life's Journeys podcast by Aviva. I'm Paddy Delaney and I'll be your host for today's episode, which is all about helping you develop financial knowledge for each of the decades of your life, from your 20s right through to retirement. I'll be taking you through the best practices for all of life's stages. I'm joined by guests Noel and Noleen, who will take us through the biggest financial decisions they had to make throughout the decades of their life, and they'll share the advice they would give themselves now if they could go back in time. As an independent financial advisor, my role is to help clients make informed decisions and take ownership of their financial future. My podcast, called Informed Decisions, is a weekly podcast sharing ideas and insights to help consumers in Ireland. I'm super excited to be here with you today, recording this Life Journeys podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, if you will.
My name is Noleen and I'm from Dublin. I'm 63 years old. I started my career as a bookkeeper in merchant banking.
Right.
And then I went on to be an administrator in a publishing house. And at 32 years of age, I did a Start Your Own Business course.
Right.
And I went into some business ventures, cartridge recycling, wedding planning, smoked salmon business.
Okay.
I was very cautious though, and I really didn't invest much money into them.
Okay.
I didn't really have a team around me either. I was doing everything on my own, so I didn't have media, etc.
Okay.
Marketing, all that sort of thing. So they didn't work out. I went on then, when I realised I wasn't the businesswoman of the year, I went on to study music, and I became a professional musician and a music teacher. And then I went on to get a qualification in business studies with an emphasis on IT. And that in turn led me to a teaching qualification. So I was teaching in the adult education sector for 10 years.
Wow. Okay, so quite a colourful journey.
Very colourful, yes, and tiring.
I'd love to delve, if we had more time, I'd love to delve into hear all about those adventures. And Noel?
Yeah, I'm 62. I'm originally from Tipperary. At 19, I opted out of college and joined the Gardaí. I had considered being an accountant before that, but I thought the Gardaí would be more interesting. It turned out to be quite demanding and dangerous at times, but overall it was very interesting. And the other thing is I got to reinvent myself every few years within it by transferring into different sections and being assigned to different projects. I saw a lot of humanity and the human condition in all its various forms. But I met a lot of really great people from all walks of life while I was in the Gardaí. And I served for 33 years and retired from that job then when I was 53.
Okay. So it's fair to say you guys have been retired, give or take, 10 years approximately. In other roles. And stuff in
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, look, the whole idea of today's conversation is to look at the decades throughout your lifetimes and what experience you had financially speaking, right? Without going into real specifics, but in general terms, what your experience was under each decade. So, if we were to go, I won't say way back, but if we were to go back to your 20s, what would you say were the big financial decisions that you had to make in your 20s?
Well, I learned how to drive when I was 17 and I got my first car when I was 20.
Okay.
I liked travelling, so what I used to do is I'd borrow from the credit union every year and I'd go travelling, and then I'd repay throughout the year, because if I had been waiting on cash I probably wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Okay.
That worked out very well, and then I met Noel at the age of 26 and we bought a house.
He put a stop to all that travel, did he?
I think, yes, it's all his fault.
Okay, so you bought a house at 27.
We bought a house, I was about 28. We decided we weren't borrowing any more money for, buying new furniture, that we'd do what we had with what we had, and then we'd replace it as time went by.
Okay, so that was your 20s for you, Noel?
Yeah, well, my 20s was probably similar. I was single and I had no real ties. I travelled quite a bit myself as well, and I enjoyed a pretty good social life.
Yes.
I suppose the first major financial decision I had to make was actually buying a car.
Okay.
And I didn't buy my car, I'd say, until I was, maybe 22. At 27, I bought a house. I had been saving for a while for it.
Okay.
At that time, you had to show that you had a 10% deposit and show that you'd been saving for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I had been saving a bit for that. Once I turned 25, I started kind of focusing on that a bit.
Very good.
And then I'm not sure if I stopped Nolan's travel or she stopped mine, but we still have travelled quite a bit both together since
very
then.
good.
You know?
Excellent. Okay, and what I find interesting is that for people that are in their 20s today, not an awful lot has changed. I guess from the perspective of buying a car, that can be still a big financial decision for people to make, whether they're borrowing or whether they're saving to buy that car. I did a piece of research last year, and on average, a relatively new car, including depreciation and tax and maintenance, etc., will cost in the region of €500 per month for somebody to keep on the road. Which, if you're paying tax on your income, which most of us are, you need to earn probably €700 or indeed €900 to actually get that net amount to keep a car on the road. So it's a significant commitment, even something like a car. And indeed, speaking of buying houses, it's the very same now, right? In terms of the deposits that people would need, and indeed their savings record that they'd need to have before a bank or a lender will actually deem them a safe pair of hands to lend money to. My general recommendations for people in their 20s is not less about the financial, and it's about that aspect of going and living life and enjoying the time that you have, right? To go and do the adventures and explore. But what I do suggest to people is to educate themselves around personal finance, because personal finance is generally not something people learn about in school, right, or indeed college. And then when they come out into the workforce, they're earning income. Some people are naturally well able to look after that income, and others less so. So what I do encourage people is to actually educate themselves about finance, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading blogs, reading books, but just understand how to manage money. In your 20s, you have cars bought, you have a house bought, and into your 30s then, what were the big life events or big financial decisions that you had in your 30s?
Well, I became a mom in my 30s.
Fantastic.
So I took care of my daughter in the day. I was doing those businesses.
Yes, okay. At the same time, you were juggling all that?
At the same time in the daytime, which are
not easy.
Yeah, not easy. But it was at home, you see, so
Yes,
I could. It was very flexible.
Yeah.
But then I decided to invest in a PA system. And I started to gig and sing. So I went out in the night time, which was great. We decided to buy an investment property. So we remortgaged the house.
So that was your 30s from your perspective. Noel, from you?
Yeah, the biggest investments in my early 30s were all around home improvements. We built an extension onto the house and put in double glazing, which kind of saw as an investment. We also started putting money aside for my daughter's education, which was, she was very young at the time, but you have to start looking ahead. Yeah. And so we were kind of looking in probably at different savings plans and insurance policies and sort of investments for the future, because it kind of focuses our mind slightly more so than in our 20s,
Yeah, absolutely. And what I guess witness a lot is when people become parents, that it sort of sharpens the focus a little bit on preparing and protecting your kids now that you're all of a sudden responsible for. And there's nothing I don't think can prepare you for that mindset that sort of kicks in when that happens for most of us. So what typically would come into play there for people if they don't already own a home, when kids arrive, is like, okay, I want to put a roof over our heads, and there's sort of a natural instinct to do that. But also a real need to protect, if you are earning an income, to protect that income. So for instance, if you are unable to work due to an illness or an injury or indeed a debt, that there would be some form of cover for the income that would disappear if you disappeared. So whether that's income protection or life cover or illness cover or whatever type of resource would be needed to fill in that gap would be key. And also that preparing for the future, which you guys have already mentioned about saving for children's education. The thing that I would encourage people to do is to try and prepare even a little bit for some of the long-term expenses and long-term needs that you know you're going to have. So looking back on your 30s, what advice would you give yourself if you were to go back to your 30s?
I'm pretty happy with the choices I made, but I think perhaps I could have focused a bit more on getting promotion.
Okay.
Promotion would have led to more status, but status isn't really all that important because to me it's nice, but I can't cash it in the bank.
Yeah.
So,
no.
but
Can't spend status. Yeah.
Aside from status, obviously it would have meant more pay.
Yeah.
But perhaps a worse work-life balance.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's very likely that it's probably almost definite that I would have ended up working and living away from home.
Yes.
Right. And, with a young family and the extra travel and all that would negate, I think, any extra salary that I would have got.
Yeah.
And just one thing that comes to mind, actually, I was at home on the day my daughter took her very first steps, and I couldn't really put a monetary, as much as important as money is, I couldn't put a monetary value on that being there for that,
Fantastic. Okay, great. So that's really valuable insight indeed. And for yourself, Noleen, looking at the 30s, what advice would you give yourself?
I had very good business concepts, but I didn't invest much money. I was very cautious, didn't take really risks. So looking back on that, I'll give you an example. When we were looking for properties, I'd be trawling through newspapers because, of course, we didn't have the internet then.
No.
So I'd be trawling through newspapers and listings and all of that. And I think the internet came into Ireland around 1991.
Okay.
And websites, and I was thinking, gosh, if I only had all of these auctioneers and all of these properties on one website, I said. And I thought, wow, there's a great idea. Now, this is well before Daft or My Home or anything. And I was thinking, God, that is a great idea. But I didn't go for it.
Yes.
I knew there was a niche in the market. I knew it was a great idea. But again, I didn't have that courage to go with it and go develop a website. So I suppose looking back, I think I'd take a little bit more risk.
Would you?
If there's a niche in the market, if it's a very good concept, and you think it's going to work, and in fact we all know now that it did work, with the great websites out there for housing.
Okay.
So that would be the advice I'd give myself, really.
Well, you seem very entrepreneurial to me, Noleen. So the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The next best time is today. So maybe now's your time.
I'm too old.
Okay. So if we then fast forward to your 40s, I believe in your 40s you decided to foster children. Is that right?
Yes. Well, at the age of 32, I had a miscarriage, and I had one child then, and we tried with no success to have a second child. So we went to have some testing. We thought maybe something is wrong, and there was nothing wrong.
Okay.
So we decided as time went on then that we might consider adoption.
Yes.
But there were no babies in Ireland for adoption at that time.
Okay.
So we decided maybe the adoption from abroad. So we went to a meeting about that, and you'd have to have 10,000 Irish pounds, it was at the time, for interpreters, hotels, travel, and all of that. Okay. So of course we didn't have that kind of money. So we hit that one on the head. But on the way out of that meeting, we saw a poster on the wall reading, "Have you considered fostering?"
Wow.
And that's what led us into fostering. And over the years, we fostered 5 children, and we're still in touch with some of them.
Fantastic.
And then another big decision I made in my 40s was to pursue my education further. I invested in the teaching qualification I mentioned earlier. And I became a teacher in the adult education sector, which is in the evening, which was perfect because I could stay home in the daytime. So that worked out really well. Okay,
well done. So they were big decisions, both, right?
They were very big decisions.
And from
huge.
a financial perspective, did you have to do some planning around that, or consider the impacts and how to manage all of that together? Did you have to figure all of that out?
We had like it did take a lot of discussion, and it is a big decision to make, but one that we would have absolutely no regrets whatsoever about doing. It was a very nice thing to do. I have to say, you know,
absolutely.
And we were very happy we did it.
Great.
You know, when I was in my 40s, also I went back to college in the evenings, and because we had foster kids at the time, you know, I was hoping that if I was going for promotion again, and I got promotion,
Yes.
but I was lucky because it came at a time, and it was for a position that actually was quite suitable to me. I didn't have to travel away from home.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And so I was lucky, you know, but I'm a great believer in karma.
Yeah.
And having an increase in income allowed us then to invest in some other different financial products and to remortgage our own house. Some of the investments worked well, and some of them probably not so well. So there were certain times when we had to maybe stressful enough sort of times that we had to steer a course through maybe choppy waters. But it's, you know, we had to tighten our belts, and it all worked out fine, thank God.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. And indeed, when people are in their 40s, what I often see is people's careers, if they're working full time, are probably well established. And as you've touched on there, Noel, you know, incomes might go up due to promotions or change of roles. And invariably, one of two things will happen in those circumstances: that their lifestyle will expand to absorb that additional income, right? As in, they'll buy more stuff, they'll buy newer cars, they'll whatever that might be, or they will actually utilize that additional income to put it aside for future needs, whether that's education or retirement pots or whatever the case may be, or big holidays, etc. In the 40s, it can be quite a challenging time from a financial perspective, where you've got, you know, kids, you know, maybe going to secondary school, you know, they're starting to cost a lot more. They need all the latest gear and clothes and all that sort of stuff, and then you're trying to manage that with, you know, saving, you know, short, medium and long-term needs as well. So it's a case of really understanding where you are in that cycle and trying to put a plan in place. Looking back, what advice would you give your 40-year-old selves?
Well, before the crash in 2008, we invested in a property abroad.
Okay.
And I suppose looking back on that, I would have been a bit more careful, because we were pretty confident in the property market at that time. Things were flying at that time. And we couldn't have predicted the crash. So looking back in my 40s, I think I'd be a bit more careful and not be taken by, you know, those crest of a wave thing, the market going up and that kind of thing.
It can be very easy, and have great empathy for people when they, you know, they're swept along by media and, you know, everybody talking about, property or whatever investment might be all the rage. It was, you know, cryptocurrencies there a couple of years ago, right? I find often it's a case of nearly helping people avoid the mistakes as opposed to finding the winners, right? It can help people achieve their long-term financial goals. Noel, what would you think yourself in terms of what you would do differently in the 40s?
In the 40s, well, my general advice, I suppose, would be, and I did actually follow this advice to some extent, and maybe if I went back again, I might follow it even more. But basically, is like the old cliche, not to keep all one's eggs in one basket. Yes. And the other thing is, we all have to make decisions throughout our life. Most decisions have some kind of risk, and especially with financial decisions. So my advice would be always to do, you know, as much research as you can beforehand, and get trusted opinions, and try to figure out the consequences of one's actions.
I think you've touched on a really interesting point: diversification. You know, not putting all our eggs in one basket. And I've worked with several people who probably were guilty of that in the past, but have seen the benefits of taking a diversified approach to investments. And I'm a huge advocate of the the potential and indeed the returns that people have achieved from investing in the likes of well-diversified global equities over the last 20 years, over the last 100 years, the returns have been second to none, including property and including everything else that you care to mention. So it's a case of figuring out what's your need for return, what do you actually want to achieve, what's the end goal, right? And then what's the best structure that will help you get there, ultimately is a way of approaching that. So looking at your 50s, which is last decade, essentially for you, what were the major things that happened for you in your 50s financially?
Well, the major thing that happened to me was I retired at 53 and did some ad hoc work. Then you could retire after 30 years. I did actually 33 years in it. So that was a major decision. But retiring was an absolutely huge decision. Yes. It has financial implications and has it's life-changing implications. Yeah. But to be honest with you, in relation to that, I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever.
Most of the clients that I work with are sort of in their late 40s or indeed their 50s, and within 10 years of retirement. And what I find is, the finish line, for want of a better term, really comes into focus at that stage. And most people aren't fortunate enough to have defined benefit schemes, right? Defined benefit pension schemes, which are going to guarantee them a set amount of income for the rest of their days. And those that don't have defined benefit schemes need to be very planful about how they structure their retirement pots and pension pots as they approach that finish line. And indeed considering what their drawdown strategy is and what income they will need once they do retire and how they're going to generate that. So whether that's from pensions or whether that's investments in property, investments in equity funds, investments in forestry, residential property, etc. It's a case of figuring out what is the most effective and tax efficient way of structuring all of that, and indeed when you want to retire. Life is not a rehearsal, right? We only get one crack at it. So I would encourage people, once they're financially able to retire, is a great time to actually think about, okay, what do we want to do and when do we want to do it? So you're now in your 60s. What big decisions or how are you finding, the management of finances now that you're in your 60s at this stage?
Well, looking back, I think we've landed in a very good place.
Great.
So
I
we're
think so, yeah.
pretty happy with our lot now,
Well done.
really.
Well done.
We've paid off our loans, except for the tracker mortgage, which is a very good place to be. We sold one car, so we don't have, because we didn't really need it.
Yeah,
it was just sitting in the driveway and cost us money. Sure. And now it's a time about, we'll say, just maintaining things as we're going forward, and including maintaining our health and all that kind of stuff.
Important.
Yeah, and keeping active mentally and physically, which I think is very important as well. Definitely when people are in their 50s, they definitely be looking ahead to a life where they won't be working and their career will become to a finish, and looking forward to it with enjoyment in mind.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I often see, and I'm really interested to get your take on it, is that when people retire, their expenses and their expenditure, all right, don't necessarily fall, because they all of a sudden have maybe 40 hours a week where they used to be working, right, that they're not now working, that they want to fill doing something, right? So and oftentimes the money they need actually increases, though their income might have stopped, right? How have you found that your expenditure has gone up, gone down, or stayed broadly similar since you retired?
Well, we just love traveling.
Okay, so travel's a
we're
big
still
thing.
Travelers, and
Great.
we that costs money.
Yeah, for sure.
Big money sometimes. It's nice to have a bit of money for that, but be sensible about it as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some things we'll say maybe that when I was working before, I could afford maybe to get somebody in to do certain jobs.
Okay.
Like let's say, but now I might have more time on my hands, so I could maybe paint the hall and landing myself.
Okay,
but obviously, that's why I need to keep fit, because there'll come a time when I won't be able to do it myself. But Yes, like I mean, things, prices of food don't stop going up.
Correct.
We've been lucky, I suppose, so far because I'm not sure what the inflation rate is at the moment, but
1%.
yes, so it hasn't been too cruel, but we don't know what's going to happen, 2 years down the road.
That's correct. And I think inflation is one of the great unknowns for people, and one of those hidden threats to a successful retirement income is that. And given the fact that a 60-year-old couple, as of today, right, if they're 60 today, there is a 50-50 chance that one of them will be here in 35 years, right? So that is the stats, right? The 50% chance that one of the two will be here in 35 years. 35 years is a long time, so that's great, right? But there's also, we have to consider, how are we going to generate an income for 35 years, and how will we ensure that we can maintain and keep in line with inflation? So there are things really that I would encourage people to consider.
Absolutely. For instance, Noel's pension hasn't gone up since he retired.
Yeah.
So that's coming on 10 years now.
There you go.
So you have to make plans.
Absolutely.
You know, because you can't rely on things like that.
Absolutely. So it's a case of figuring out all of this. And I know the likes of, there is it's a state-funded body, it's a registered charity called the Retirement Planning Council. They're based in Dublin. They run courses for people that are approaching retirement to help them figure out the financial aspects, but also the life aspects, right? And how are they going to keep themselves physically and mentally engaged, and what are they going to do on a bleak December afternoon, or whatever the case may be, to keep them challenged and keep them motivated and enjoying life, I suppose.
Oh, we'll have to get the phone number.
So fundamentally, I think for me it's been really interesting to hear your journey through those decades, and thank you so much for sharing it, and hopefully it'll resonate with a lot of the people that might be listening to this. I know I certainly have really gained a lot from chatting to you, so thank you very much indeed.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Paddy. We've learned a lot from you. And it's a pity I didn't have this conversation years ago, but you were involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe in the next lifetime.
Yeah.
Okay.
For all of life's journeys, you're safe in the hands of Aviva.